Hey everyone, and welcome to Hire Diverse Voices, the series where we're amplifying diverse voices to support job seekers in their journeys and to empower employers as they pursue diversity and inclusion for their workplaces. Today, I am joined by a special guest, as we are every week. Her name is Olia, and she is the CEO of Transformers Academy, and she's going to be sharing with us her own expertise. Olia, before we dive in and talk more about our topic today, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your professional background?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Shauna. And hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today and looking forward to a great discussion. A very important topic. And on my side, so my entire professional career have been pretty much in Canada, and I worked with companies that are global as well, and it all been in human resources. And as I always joke, on the better side of human resources, I take care of learning and development. So really came from the point of how do we empower employees to do their best, to be happy when they come to work, and what does that really mean? So that passion took me on the journey through many roles and many cities in Canada. And now Transformers Academy is the next step on that journey. It's the AI-driven learning management system that we founded last year, and it's essentially empowering learning and development team or anybody who's creating content with quality and with extreme speed of creation. So that's a bit about me.
Wow, that is so cool. That is so cool. And so today we are going to dive in and talk about the whole idea of hiring and overcoming unconscious bias in hiring, which is really, it can be a huge challenge for employers in a lot of different ways. So we'll explore some practical approaches for this to mitigate sort of those unconscious biases in hiring processes. It sounds like you've had like a really diverse journey yourself. So you lived in different places, and you've been in Canada for how long?
For about 10 and a half years. And
Yeah.
yes, I'm originally from Ukraine, so I know what immigrant means, what it
Yeah.
means to be an immigrant. I know the journey, and I'm still a female founder in tech. So kind of a lot of different angles there.
Yeah, there's definitely a few things happening for sure, and so it sounds like Transformers Academy is something that that you're really passionate about. What led you, like what piece of your experience or your journey led you to create this really cool company?
Thank you. Thank you. You know, it's a really good question because, as I said, I never, if you would ask me a few years ago, I never expected I'll be here. And life always has the way to bring you on the journey. And I think that's what happened to me from the first job that I got. I never planned to be a trainer or coach. I never thought that I'm good at it. But somehow, as an immigrant, I really struggled with the first office job in Canada. And I had to pay the bills, I had to pay for my university. And essentially, I had to accept very basic job as a salesperson and ended up being at Nestle Nespresso. And I was really lucky with people recognizing in me the skill of training. And that's how it all started. And essentially, I was just mastering the skill, going from a company to another, improving quality of learning culture, really driving the revenue through that. And the magic that I've been seeing that happens behind when people learn and understand the product properly, and when they start loving it, it's amazing what it does to organizations. And so I definitely knew that my heart is there. I knew that I have a skill to do it. And then at some point, I came to this time in my life, and I always say I really love Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So I came to level 4,
Mm.
right? When you come through security, community, recognition, you have everything. And I got to the point where I had a salary I wanted, I had a role that I wanted, and I thought it's going to be end of my life, right? So I'm going to be, that's the only role I can get in my life. And here I am, like 28, sitting there, and it's there. And so I felt at that point, instead of being super happy and excited, I felt empty. And so very
Mhm.
successful career, like every year almost a promotion. And then at some point you just feel like, what's next? Like I didn't feel that I'm fulfilled. And that really knocked me down. So that was like a big hit on me. I took a step back. Took me a bit of the journey through the figuring it out who I am and what do I want to do. And a lot of people always around me used to tell me, like, go on your own journey, you know, kind of maybe consulting, maybe something else. And I did join another company. So I was invited to work for another company for 10,000 employees, great project. I felt like it's a next level. I came in and I really shortly realized that I need to do exact same thing that I just did in the previous company. And it's probably going to take me another 3 to 5 years. And it
Mm.
was good. It was great. But what I've asked myself, I was like, is that really what you want to do your entire life? Just go from one company to another and keep redoing it? Can you help more than one company in 3 to 5 years? And so I started thinking of how to connect that. Took a big pause. For the first time, probably took a pause on, how people say, take the time to smell the roses. Went on the trip around the world, looking for technologies, meeting people, seeing contrast, and just like looking backwards. I was looking backwards and trying to see what frustrated me in my work. Like, why did I stop loving it? And what I loved, what can I do forever and ever and again and again? And few patterns emerged, and I realized it just hit me like a cold water at some point. And I'm like, oh my God, every company I come into, every single one, no matter in which role, gives me a bunch of documents, bunch of PDFs, and literally takes my teams forever to figure it out. And everybody says, here you go, make something out of it. And often it would be, roles like a CFO. My CFO came to me and he was like, can you do a training for my finance team? And I'm like, absolutely. So he gave me documents. I have documents, but no knowledge, and nobody on my team has knowledge about finances. And then he didn't have time, or anybody on his team. So we never built that training, right?
Mhm.
And so I was playing a lot with AI at that time, and I started to understand how it works, how to look at it. I went to Collision in Toronto. I was listening how VC looking at it, how investors talking about it, what they're looking for. And I understood that it really can optimize our job.
Mm.
And so essentially, I looked at it, how to make my previous life job easier,
Mm.
and Transformers Academy was born.
Wow. Wow. It sounds like, I don't know, it sounds like and I always think this too, like there's always these real kind of like nuggets or clues like in our past experience, but we often get like so tied up in like the day to day and the hustle and what's next that we don't get the benefit of like that pause and like reflecting on what we've already learned along the way, and then we end up missing it. So it's amazing that you were able to like stop and pause and see those. There's I think for all of us, there's like these big clues, but it's that taking that moment to actually look and find them. So yeah, so thanks for sharing that, and congrats, because I feel like that's a big deal to realize that, and to take that moment for reflection. So when it comes to teams that are hiring right now, and you've obviously built companies and worked with large teams, and done some hiring along the way, employers will talk about, we need to mitigate kind of unconscious bias, but what can teams actually do to raise awareness of this issue and how it shows up, because it's so unconscious, right? Like you don't know it's there. So how do you actually figure it out? It's a conundrum.
Yeah, it's a very great question. And I really love our topic today when we were discussing. I'm like, I like it because I'll step back. There was time in my life when I was in human resources, and I've had to do a lot of hiring. And I was really close to the hiring manager as well. I call her my work sister.
Yeah.
And she was amazing in what she did, right? But I was trying to understand, and everybody were talking diversity and inclusion. It was like buzzing around, and I didn't feel comfortable about it. And I'm like, everything I'm listening, all of the webinars, external, internal, it doesn't give me a correct way. I feel that something is off. And this is like my entire life. When I feel that something is off, I need to solve it. So that's when I challenge status quo. That's when I'm asking if it can be better. And it eventually leads to good things. But at this time, I was like, this is my gap because I didn't grow up here. And then maybe like I don't understand something historically. So what I did, I went to Cornell University and I took a course on diversity and inclusion in the workplace. And life just became like 55 times easier after that. I've not only learned the historical piece, but also really understand that a lot of organizations talk about diversity and inclusion without really talking about diversity and inclusion.
Mm.
It sounds good and there is no clarity. And the reality is it's quite simple if you look at it, and the techniques are phenomenal and they have reasoning behind. And I think the few things that stand out to me, so practical things, I'll share a lot of examples today. A few practical things that stand out starts with, how do we even post the job interview, right? So, or like the job description. I never realized that at the minimum we do a mistake already when we doing the job description, and often they're generic, and so we describe the role in a way either masculine or feminine, and often it's been like from the
Mm.
old ages, right? It's been pretty standard, and we use the same words, but those words, as an example, attract right candidates or don't attract the candidates that you want. So it's interesting because on one side, companies really trying to increase the amount of females in the workplaces or amount of people who are coming from a different backgrounds, right? So essentially trying to make the diverse pool, but those candidates never even apply, and it's all starts because the way they read the job description tells them that it's not for them. And
Mm.
so a good example, like I was shocked, even I was posting the wrong job descriptions for my own teams, and I'm all that I do, trying to really give an opportunity to everyone. And so a few good words that stand out for me. I'm a high achiever myself. So I do have a bit of a masculine way of handling the business when it comes
Mhm.
to like more professional life. And then so the words I use is also sometimes talk more to men versus women, right?
Mhm.
And so I've actually pulled it up, few words from the course, and a good example is when we talk about who is the job for or what are we looking for, we use words such as assertive, decisive, ambitious. I'm the person who would always look for someone ambitious, but that talks more to the male side of
Yeah.
the human
Yeah.
versus to the female. And on the other side, the nurturing, kind, warm, collaborative, helpful, right? Like nurturing in particular stand out a lot. And when I've looked back, I'm like, this is so right. And we never
Mhm.
posted in the job description. And nurturing, managers should be nurturing, leaders should be nurturing.
Mm.
That's a skill to be proud of. And that's the skill that we underestimate. So that
Yeah.
was my first example that I would say. I'll stop here. Maybe you have a question before I kind of go into
Yeah.
another.
No, I feel like that is so important. Intuition too is another one, right? That we like, it's not something like you would not read that in like an intuitive kind, you know what I mean? Like we don't
Absolutely.
typically include that language in job descriptions. And I think that's why the unconscious bias conversation is so interesting, because it's so deeply ingrained in our language and what we value professionally, that it can be quite a lot to unpack and begin to understand. I think of too, like some of the words that will encourage us to self-screen out of the job application process altogether as females. So if I'm like a really feminine identifying female, those words like ambitious or driven or assertive particularly might have that might make me feel uncomfortable. I'd be like, I'm not those things. I'm not. So I'm going to screen out of the process. So right from the get-go, like we are limiting our candidate pool and screening out certain candidates, often really unintentionally. But then we'll put like a diversity and inclusion disclaimer at the end of the ad, and kind of, you know what I mean. But it doesn't
Exactly.
matter if the language isn't there to begin with. It sounds like that was a really good course, like a really good learning takeaway from that
Yeah.
program as well.
Honestly, amazing, because it really made me feel more comfortable as a leader to do the right things. Because
Yeah.
before, obviously, even if you're promoted, you really still, if you're not sure on the history or you don't understand something, I always say just go dig and until you understand it, because it's so, so helpful. Now I'm like very easygoing. I can right away see, talk about it, even catch myself like so many times with like, this is not right. This is not right. And another thing that was really interesting for me, for my personal example, In one of the tech companies I worked for, we had a really big challenge with some roles, like developers. We never stopped hiring developers, and we always had a lot of them. But it's just like a tech companies always evolve, and then not only tech companies, some other companies were tougher to hire for, and so referral program was a big one, right? And so a
Mhm.
lot of companies use referral program. And to be honest with you, I was shocked when I find out that referral program is actually not a good strategy to diversify the pool. It against that, it's opposite, because what's happening with referral, and there is two things, there is two biases. So first, when there is a referral, most of the time they already will get an interview because you rely on someone else reference. But at the same time, it brings people that are alike. So
Mhm.
essentially, people select people that are more alike them and they like them. So, and that's natural. So that's all of us. We are going to be closer to a person and faster going to find the connection to somebody who are like us. We have something in common. So that's typically what you're going to get through referrals. And another thing, which is really stopping company from moving forward when you burn referrals is actually creativity. So it's
Mhm.
interesting because people know each other. They're not as creative when they don't. And so they already have a history, and they already, especially if they have a history working together, they're kind of used to the style of each other. So instead of stepping out of the box, right, and smell the
Yeah.
roses, they're just hitting into the same ways that they worked before.
Mhm.
That's not necessarily the right or innovative or new ways. So essentially, the productivity might even go down. And that
Mhm.
was another interesting twist that I found.
Yeah, that's it was so interesting that you bring up referral programs too, because it was ages ago. I'll repost it, but I had a LinkedIn post that went like got quite a bit of visibility, and I took the position of this LinkedIn post based on some stuff that I had read that we shouldn't have referral programs anymore. Who like it started a bit of a debate. Like people feel really strongly about referral programs because the other side of the conversation is like, well, shouldn't a person, if I know they're going to be a fit problematic, right, for the company or for the role or whatever, and they're already partially vetted, wouldn't that be a good thing for the company? But to your point, it's like, well, yes and no. If your company's not diverse to begin with, you're basically creating like, I just think of Mean Girls, you know what I mean? Like the Mean Girls clique, right? If you're in the clique, you keep coming into the company, but people who are outside of that clique just never get the chance. So I find the referral programs one really interesting. So for folks watching today, what do you think of referral programs? Like, would you use one or not? And again, like I said, I'll reshare that post. But it was really interesting to see both sides of the conversation. And it's, you know what, I can be empathetic to both of them. But at the end of the day, I can't help but think of Mean Girls and what those programs are doing
You
with.
know what? And you're so right, because honestly, like while you were sharing, I completely align with you. And then what I was thinking about all of the referrals I know who either came to my team and reported to me or essentially work somewhere separately. And so each time I go back, I'm noticing that it's a different behavior first, because when referral comes in, they already feel that they have a backup. So they almost don't go through the same onboarding. They act differently in the onboarding. So they adjust slightly differently. And to be honest with you, my least successful hires were the ones that were referrals so
Hmm.
far, at least my personal experience. So would be really interested to hear how everyone else felt about their experiences.
Yeah, that's a good point too, because and I think it's one of the challenges that HR faces and hiring managers face too is often don't measure like the whole process. It's often only a piece of the recruitment process, right? Like how many applicants did you get? How many conversions did you get on your ad? Or how many interviews did you do? And how many hires did you get? And it's like, okay, but there's so many more metrics that need to continue kind of past that, like for example, like what was the performance, and can you go back and link that individual's performance and deduct any patterns in terms of how the candidate was initially acquired. So anyways, it's a complicated discussion, and to your point, if you're having that experience, do other organizations even know they're having that experience, right? Like can they draw the line that far along? Who knows? Who knows? So when it comes to minimizing unconscious bias, it sounds like, first of all, it's going to be really important that we have some education and self-awareness as well. What can technology do to help us help us minimize the whole idea of unconscious bias in our recruitment processes?
Yeah, very good question. So this is a very tricky one, specifically for hiring. So let's say for learning and development, because I know that people are still scared of AI. I think like technology is really good for some areas right now, where for others it's still quite conflicting, and this is one of them. So before I started Transformers Academy, I was invited to another startup. It was also software, also using AI, and they were doing kind of pre-screening, right, of the candidates and stuff. And that's a very, very great zone right now, specifically because of those wording that we were talking. So right now, technology is not so helpful, at least yet, for that area. So each time I meet the company, I still always ask them, how do you make sure that there is no bias? Because I think the future was use the technology, but it's very difficult right now to do. And I think one of the ways that I would say it can do, it combined it with blind interviewing. So there's two really, really good practices of doing hiring. So one is blind interviewing, the second one, internships. We'll talk more at the end about that. And so what I mean by that, in a nutshell, we really judge the person before we even get them to the first interview, and unintentionally. This is like in our core. This is, again, the first 4 seconds, every person we meet, we judge. And so we need to step back and cut ourselves and then do it again differently, right? So what's happening with the resume, essentially when we get the resume, and this is also could be happening right now with the technologies that are pre-screening, because technologies are pre-screening through keywords, right? So that's not always fair, because really like you want to see the person. And then I think when technology can come to the game, it's actually remove some of the parts or hide some parts of the interview. So blind interviewing, one of the best methods of removing diversity and inclusion, but it's also one of the hardest to implement. There have been already a lot of projects by top universities in US, Canada, some companies, and still not really successful implementation, just because it's very, very difficult to do. But what it does, it kind of hides the first and the last name, which is really cool, because when we hide the first and the last name, you cannot really guess the origin. And again, coming back, guess, because you never know. At the same time, there is a perception. And my personal example, I came to Canada, and until I was using on my resume, Olga, I would not get an interview in the office. No jokes, like perception right away there. And I was asking my friends later and random people, and I'm like, okay, if you forgot about me and you hear Olga, what's your first impression? Just like be honest. And everybody would drive it back to like a big Russian teacher in glasses, mad and angry. And I was like, how does that perception helps me in life, right?
Yeah.
But people only took it from my name. And so as soon as I changed it to Olia, people couldn't get the origin, and I got absolutely different experiences in life. That was insane to me.
Yeah.
And so people do, through the name, they identify gender, the culture, they have perception of the how culture work, they have perception of the work ethic, and they have perception of the languages, and that's already immediately put a lot of labels on you.
Yeah.
So just taking out that part is really, really good. And then later, when we go to education, right? We're not allowed to do our age, but when you see the education, you can calculate the age of the person. So basically, you understand right away what's kind of the category. And then again, I used to be always in the category, oh, you're too young for this. Oh, you're too young for that. It only like started shifting now, but also like it doesn't bother me anymore. At the same time, a lot of people would not apply because you're too young for this, or people keep telling you that. Another interesting part is obviously hobbies, right? So hobbies is an amazing section in the way you want to know it, because you kind of see how the person lifestyle is, but at the same time, why would the person lifestyle should impact the way that they get the job or they do not get the job? And if I'm a runner and I'm seeing their runner, I'm like, oh, I want to invite them to the interview because I know that running is helpful for productivity. I have my own biases already, and that's not a good thing. I'm seeing somebody reading books. I love writing books too. I was like, let's talk about it. But does that mean that they cannot do the job? No, it does not. So if somebody's, let's say, I don't know, I don't ski. So if somebody's skiing, that means that they're not a good match for me. So a lot of biases like that comes out. And we not only try and like in our head. We're not only judging the activities, we're also trying to guess what their behavior. Are they introverts? Are they extroverts? How they're going to work with the team? But we don't know.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting part. So I think technology can really help to streamline process for blind interviewing and select more on the experience, years of experience, kind of do a summary highlights, and then select the candidates for the interview. And then essentially the next steps after you meet the person already, even like doing, yes, I understand, takes a lot of time for pre-screening. Send the video to people, let them record themselves for 5 minutes, just an introduction. This can be all automated. If I'll see the person for 5 minutes, at least based on my experience and my intuition, I can tell a lot about the person. In 5 minutes, usually I can say if I'll hire the person or not. I think technology can really help with that.
Yeah, I'm so with you. And I think like, I mean, and the other benefit of like the video interview, for example, of submitting a video is the productivity enhancement as well from the HR team's perspective. But yeah, there's so much that technology can do. And I love that you bring up the name discussion. That was another heated discussion that I've had on LinkedIn. And I teach an MBA program, which is primarily international students. And so to seek to understand kind of, because this was the experience that you're describing with being Olga versus Olia was I was hearing like similarities of this. So I like dove into some data and some studies around it. And there were some particular studies around like origins of names and likelihood of being screened out in the job interview process. So a very real thing that candidates experience and have actually in my past work, when working with clients in career coaching, have had candidates do this exact play that you're doing. And it's like, we're not saying that it's right or acceptable by any stretch, but it's like a real thing. And much as you described, sometimes people, it's like, we're in a broken system. Let's acknowledge that and let's figure out the hacks to get what we need to get. And then we can start to affect change. So I've had clients and students take the path of, I'm going to modify my name for the purposes of getting through those initial pre-screenings. And I just can't imagine how gross and difficult that must feel as that individual. Like that's quite literally like your identity that you have to alter to get the visibility you deserve. That must be so hard.
Yeah, honestly, it's been quite a journey. I think for me, I fell in love with my Olia, and then the book that I've released last year, the book came out under Olia, and I'm legally going to be changing it. As much as it sounds like I'm happy about it, it still came not from the happy place. So, I think it's very challenging. And I know a lot of people who really upset about that, and it's really important for them to use their full name.
I think it's a very personal and individual journey for everyone. But at the end of the day, I think it's important that we acknowledge that it's not just, okay, like, let's just write something different on the form. No, this is a deep change for so many people. And it represents a piece of us that has to change to be successful in an inherently broken system. It's really, really tough. So when it comes to technology, if you had like a favorite place to start when it came to this managing unconscious bias and tech, like what would your first pick be? I'm curious.
In terms of technology, so I'm a big fan of seeing people live. So I would definitely always go into seeing them as soon as possible. And so one of the things I do now in our company, interview process very differently from a normal process. And a lot of people would say, oh, this is like odd. At the same time, that's where the intuition kicks in. And that's where I'm saving my time a lot. So what I do often, first, I'm trying to avoid bias. I'm kind of doing manual blind interviewing. So when the interviews comes in, I don't look at anything. I just have questions in the LinkedIn post that I see either they qualified or not, based on legal cases, based on their status in Canada, just to make sure that legally they can pass through and their experience, if we have the experience requirement. And then essentially I pretty much invite everyone to the interview. And so what I do, I also give them the Calendly link and they have to answer a few more questions. And so it's interesting. It's almost like a task, right?
Mm-hmm.
So instead of choosing the person, I'm choosing based on how they respond to the task. Even sometimes the simple questions people would either miss or not notice. That's where I'm seeing, some of the skills that they might need, or I might need to help them to improve. And so I would understand if that actually skill that I would help to improve for that role, or it absolutely a must have for that role. And so often some people would not book it or would miss the emails, and essentially they filter themselves out
Yeah.
instead of me spending time calling them. I also use a lot of Calendly to have people book me, to streamline the amount of emails, and it immediately booked in my calendar. So I see it, super helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And then I still do group interviews. So it's interesting. What I do, especially with interns, I group them into, let's say, 6 people for 1 hour. We have 2 of them next week. And so, what I like about group interview, people behave differently in the group interview. Interns, not interns, different roles. It's almost interesting to see when some people would start competing, some people will start supporting, some people will be very nervous, others will be very comfortable, right? And you immediately can see how that can roll out into your future. And what's also really interesting, so let's say if we're hiring UI UX designers,
Mm-hmm.
I'm always asking them to present their portfolio, and I'm giving them a timeline just like under the 5 minutes. So it's interesting to see how people do those 5 minutes, but they also present in front of each other. So instead of me explaining why somebody make it, somebody didn't, they see it themselves. And so I do a lot of tests like that. I like to give a lot of skill tests. So one of my very good example was, and this was some other manager. She helped me to do it. She's like, "How about we do this?" And since that day, I always do it, especially for higher roles. What we did, so we went through we were looking for a trainer, right? Learning and development trainer. We were looking for someone very skilled. And then we had phenomenal interviews. And at some point I knew that we're hiring only one person. I'm like, how are we going to differentiate? I really want to hire these 2 guys. And we had like 100 applications in just like 24 hours, lots of people. We went through a lot of interviews and really good candidates. And to be honest with you, I was going to tend to go with one candidate more than another one, even though I like them both. And then we gave them a task to present to us, right? And I knew my expectations in that role. So I tailored it. What if they know nothing about a software and they had to present a software tomorrow? They have 15 minutes. They presenting to me and to my other manager, right? And then we gave them full time. So they had to book us for the meeting. They had to send the invite. They had to present. So everything. And we looked over how they use technology. How do they acknowledge us? How do they invite us for the meeting? How do they tailor the content to our roles? And it was interesting because during that test, complete switch happened between the 2 candidates. The first candidate, it looked like he didn't even know how to go through it, right? What to do. And it would be good for some companies, not for our company, for what we were looking for. The other candidate excelled, and it was amazing to watch. And then it was super successful hire, one of the best hires that I've ever done, and also very good empathetic skill set as well as showed up through that. So, I always say, give people a task. We did the same with our CTO when we were looking for a third co-founder and CTO. Same thing. And then avoid looking at really anything else other than the skills and seeing it live.
Yeah, I love that too. I think sometimes companies will get so they just get like so tied up and caught up in what they have always, particularly large at the corporate, we've always done it this way and so on. But really, with not a lot of effort, like it doesn't take a ton of effort to put together a project or a task, right? It takes some time. You've got to think it through or whatever, but it's not like you have to go hire a team of 100 consultants to come in. Like it's not that big. And you get all this new and different and data that's like particularly relevant to assessing whether or not that person can do that job from the get-go, right? If you're looking for someone who is up to speed and highly skilled, there's no way to assess that by just asking oh, they'll just tell you I'm really good at learning and development, but look at this. Now I actually have to show you that. That's so much more powerful than asking the questions. I wanted to mention too. There's this new practice that's been emerging. There's only a couple of companies doing it right now. This trend called open hiring. So the Body Shop, Canadian retailer, the Body Shop has been doing it, where it's basically a first come first, and won't work for every type of role. This is for like a frontline position, but it's basically first come first serve. If you meet all the requirements of the role, and you pass a pretty general interview, you get the job. So it's eliminating a lot of the barriers around, in the interview process. The person who interviews the best wins the job, and that's not necessarily fair. So they're just saying, we'll give everyone a fair shot to come in and give it a chance if you can meet the schedule and you have the requirements to meet the job. So it's a lot more flexible. It could be uncomfortable for a lot of employers, but this new emerging approach could be a good solution for frontline, for employers who are hiring for frontline roles who are really struggling, but at the same time have these rigorous go apply online, upload a resume, and so on processes. So it could be a good fix for that. When it comes to like sourcing candidates, Olia, do you have any tips for employers when it comes to like posting jobs to ensure that there's representation in the talent pool?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite practices is LinkedIn. LinkedIn evolving really well. In North America, it works really well. I've met a learning and development manager from one of the offices in New York recently, and we talked a lot about their plans, kind of how do they do it. They're really strong in the way they do it, even though like you do have to pay a minimum fee, but I found it's easy to set up. We're given lots of candidates and then different candidates and even people from different countries. It also gives you right away, like you connect it to the snapshot. So I think making it more simple, because I found that people don't read through the long resumes. It's interesting. It's good and bad. Long job descriptions. It's good and bad because you want your interested candidates to really dig through it and understand it. So I would say keep it a balanced job description. Candidates are looking to see what's there for them. So really, they obviously don't learn a lot about the mission, vision, or what the company about until they speak to you. I had one of the managers I know who was really picky, I would say, in the way that if the employee did not know, or potential candidate did not know much about the company, they wouldn't hire them, even if it's a really good candidate. I would discount this piece as much as I do agree why, but there is also stress involved and different understanding of the cultures and different expectations. So I wouldn't shut down the candidate just because they didn't do good enough research. I would use it as the coaching point. So I think agree on what's critical and what's not critical. Ask yourself, what can you coach people on? I was very honest with some of the candidates, what I can coach them on and what I might not be good at it yet, because I'm a human. I'm still like learning the skills, right? And I also been very honest right away, what kind of the lifestyle or the culture we have and what my expectations, how do I work as a leader, because it's not for everyone. And so I think it comes down not only to what's the job description, it comes down to how does it really work day to day. And give a bit of a discount. So if you're using any kind of tests, like PI is a good example, predictive index.
Yeah.
I got introduced to it a few years ago. Super excited because people love to learn about them. I found it's very accurate. But what's the downside on that side was PI? PI has this job match, right? Role match. So when I was hired for the first time, we did not have a predictive index. So I got hired for the role. And later, when I moved to a different role and I went into the system because I had access as a human resources, I was able to match the team to the job. I looked at my profile and at the job profile that was posted, and I was 2 on 10. I would never be hired. And in that role, I won all awards, or like most of the awards that year. Clients loved me, employees loved me. I was helpful to people. I loved what I did. But if the manager at that time would have a PI, he would never hire me. And so what I'm trying to say, it's when you're doing that job assessment, or if you have some of those jobs, don't make them to yourself, make them to the role. So what does it require a person to have to be successful at that role, not too much you as the leader, too much the job,
Mm,
because in that case for us that was the challenge, right?
yeah.
So be careful with those, and don't be scared of technologies. Everything deserves to be tested. It's like any practical skill that we developed in life came through practice, came through trials and errors. And the faster you're going to start trying, the better you understand what yours. You don't have to do it on the mass scale. It's very, very, very helpful for your productivity and in general healthy for the organization.
Yeah, it's a good point too, and a lot of the times we will forget that these assessment tools are just they're one single input. So if Olia is scoring a 2 out of 10 on this one single input to our hiring decision, but things like the interview process, the tasks she's completed, our intuition, a hiring team's perspective, the group interview tells us something different, we've got to be okay with not accepting the 2 out of 10 as being real, true, and valid. But so often those tests that assign measures, like, this so much more comfortable for a hiring manager, right? It's like, well, all those other things, it's like so largely subjective, but this tells me 2 out of 10, so that's the answer. The other thing in terms of sourcing diverse candidates, the other things that we can do, like to attract those talent pools, are to use things like, well, LinkedIn's amazing for the search functionality and the recruiter functionality, and then things like job boards. So I have a job board called hirediverse.ca, where I'm building a pool of diverse talent that's skilled and professional, so employers can post to that job board and access that audience. So it's another way to really target your diversity efforts outside of like the day-to-day of going back to the Indeeds of the world, and to access a new and different audience. And those different audiences can sometimes bring new skills and perspectives. So Hire Diverse Voices is really all about highlighting the benefits and the upside and all the good that comes with inclusion. Olia, I have one last question for you today. And that is, why is inclusion important to you?
Very good question, Shauna. And I think I'll loop it back to a few things. So first, I'm an immigrant. I'm a female immigrant. And I'll say there's a lot of biases that kind of predetermine your success. And even when I came to Canada, I came for the better future of my kids, but then I immediately right away said, okay, you cannot do this job, you cannot do that job, you cannot go public speak, you cannot, like, I never thought I would write a book in English. I never thought me, a founder of tech company. So I had a lot of side businesses, like a girly businesses, rentals, flowers, I never really took a leap of faith for a very long time. So it took me a lot of time to rebuild my confidence. And it was because of the perceptions of who I am or where I'm from or the country I'm from, right? And it seems funny because a lot of people know me as a very confident person, but that's not how it always is on the inside. And confident could be for one element, but not for another. So as I was building it, it took me very, very difficult. It was very difficult to find the job in the office at first. And I actually didn't. And I had amazing interviews. And I was a second from the contract until the assistant of the CEO called me and said, oh, you on the work permit? Call us when you're going to have a passport, And that was really, really bad. And it hit me bad. And like my career in logistics finished before it started. And then I just had to pay the bills. And remembering that, I know the tough time, I thought it was like end of the world. So now I really do give a lot of opportunities to intern people without any skills. We have the whole internship program that won an award last year. And I'm very proud of it in the way, more because it's an opportunity for people to believe in themselves. And I might not be able to hire everyone. It might not be a good experience. I'm taking a very big risk for my business because my business depends on it. What I believe in is that people who have no experience sometimes are more open-minded and more creative, and there are gems between them, but somebody needs to believe in them. And so some people believed in me in the past and brought me to where I am. I'm very grateful for absolutely every leader who brought me here. Like everything I have, it's because fantastic people on my way. Some lessons were tough, but they were helpful. And so when I'm working with interns, I'm always very honest. I'm trying, and this is a skill that was not an easy one. And for the leader, it's always tough to give a feedback, right? And it's always tough to give it to the person who's passionate, but they don't have what to compare it to, because I've been that person too. So I think what's in it for me, I asked myself as I was looking for my future and what's my mission and what I really want to accomplish in this life. I realized that there is one word stick to me, and that's word inspiring. That's what people have been telling me, and hundreds times, and I've never accepted it until just recently, and I finally accepted it, and I'm very happy that I'm bringing people to being excited. But I asked myself, like, the day when you gonna pass away and people are gonna be celebrating your life, because that's what I hope it will be. It's a celebration. How do you want to be remembered? And I said, I want to be remembered as fair. And there is one thing that I do all the time when I'm questioning my choices. I always step back and I always ask, are you fair? So I think diversity and inclusion for me, it's a exactly equals to the word fair.
Mhm.
And I believe that every person can become anyone in this world, no matter of their background, where they came from, what experience they have, what's their family situation. I came from $1 in my pocket 3 times and I survived, and I learned and I grew, and I never thought I'll be here. And I don't know what's going to be in a few years. And I wish everyone the same. You can do it.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much. If we want to keep in touch, where can we find you and why should we get in touch?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very big on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn, learning there. So feel free to join. And then if you want to find my book, it's called 66 Day Success Formula. Amazon's your best way. It's available in pretty much every country in the world. And then we can always super happy to chat about human resources, learning and development, and artificial intelligence, as well as the personal journey. So if you're trying to find your purpose in life and you feel a little bit lost or just want to share your experiences, I will be more than happy to.
Well, yeah, thanks so much for sharing today. I'll make sure that everything is linked in the video description and available in the comments here as well. So you can keep in touch with the folks who found your story inspiring. Thank you so much for your words of wisdom around inclusion, and inclusion means fair, right? This is Hire Diverse Voices. We'll be back next week. Thanks so much to our guests, and thank you to everyone for watching.